Hello and welcome. I'm Bigfoot and this is episode 17 of my Let's Play series. So, end of the last episode, what I was doing was just whizzing around trying to fill in the grid and, trying to move towards connecting everything up with so that power lines and robots and everything was connected to my perimeter wall so that it was all fully connected up. And I'm just gonna carry on with that same task. It still needs to be done. Yeah, I want to get to a point where I can release the robots, my construction robots, onto the network, and they can just start building stuff. And I want a decent network. I want a decent grid before I do that. So that's what I'm going to do. More grid. Brief interlude time. So it's time for a little bit of a discussion of philosophy, Factorio philosophy. Maybe not necessarily Factorio, it's just general philosophy. There are times in these build processes where my mind wanders and a thought pops into my head, and ordinarily I would just ignore it and just carry on because no one's listening. But I've got a microphone. I've got. If you've come this deep in the series, then maybe this might be interesting. So, the philosophy is, this might be something I mentioned earlier. It's about perfection. What is perfect? What is the perfect thing? How do you define the perfect thing? Okay, so in the context of Factorio and this map in particular, I'm just looking at my grid. Hold on, where's the map? There it is. I'm looking at my grid that I'm making out here, and it's completely irregular. It's completely, I've got big spaces, I've got small spaces, I've got thin little spaces. And it's all just a grid based on the paths and the railways that I've already built. I'm just joining it all together to make a grid. I don't really care whether it's regular or uniform or anything. I'm just, making the grid out of what the infrastructure I've already built. But some people, and I know this is because I've seen videos on YouTube, some people like the grid. They will pick a grid very, very early on and they will define their whole factory by that one grid, whatever that grid might be. And I'd imagine they tend. I'm just guessing here. Whenever I see those videos, it's not really something I'm all that interested in. But I'm guessing that if that was the sort of situation you were going to do, then you would base that grid on kind of probably the 50 by 50 grid of the Roboport, and you would make the electric poles span 25. They can span further, but that would make sense in my mind. But is that the question that I'm asking is that perfect? Yes, you've got the perfect grid and you've laid it down and it's millimeter excellent wherever the things that you want, but then all of the decisions that come after that, you're kind of held back. The perfection has already been established for the grid. Then you have to kind of jerry rig everything else to fit in that. So, and I have a workshop and I go and make stuff, carpentry stuff all the time. And I ask myself this question all the time, what is perfect? What is the perfect thing? And I don't know whether it was the first thing that I saw that made this thought pop into my mind. But the item that always comes to mind whenever I think of a perfect thing is the IKEA mug. And I know that might sound weird, but let me pull up an image. IKEA mug, right. So this is the IKEA mug that I understand it to be. And if you go around looking for it, you'll see it freaking everywhere. You'll see it on TV. Presenters will be drinking coffee and tea out of this. It'll be in the background of studios. It's in offices. It's absolutely everywhere. And when IKEA made this mug, they set out to make the perfect mug. I mean, that's what they set out to make. That's their process. They want to make the perfect mug for them. What's cheap to produce, what's quick and easy, what's easy to paint and finish, what's easy to varnish, what is perfect for them from a cost perspective, maybe from a market. All of that, whatever they considered perfect to be, this is the perfect mug. But then there's thousands of them out there, like thousands of them. So how can a thing that's perfect how can there be thousands of a thing that's apparently perfect? It's not. That's not how it works. You know, that's not how a perfect thing works. You know, a perfect thing in my mind is something that's completely individualistic. It's been handmade and tailored, completely bespoke to the individual, and there will only ever be one or two of those things. You know, there might be hundreds or thousands of those things individually, but you know, like a suit. Like that's a better example. A suit. Like if you went and you can go and get the perfect suit. You know, that's the same as every other suit that's on the rack. You know, and you just pick it up and does it fit? Yep, that works. Or you can go and get the perfect suit, the tailor-made suit, the suit that only fits you and wouldn't fit anybody else. And you know, and that's the perfect suit. It's the individual item. It's the bespoke tailor-made. So, to try and bring this back to Factorio, I mean, that is kind of the whole point and purpose of this. I'll go away. You know, if you made the perfect grid, and as I've just gone through what that perfect grid might entail. You know, fit 25, 50. You know, by using those numbers, you can come up with the perfect grid. But by doing it that way, your grid is going to be the same as everybody else's. You know, your factory isn't going to be tailor-made to you. It's going to be tailor-made to the same grid that everyone else's grid has been made by. So, I mean, I'm not telling you that that's the wrong approach. You know, that's absolutely not what I'm doing. You know, if that's the way that you want to play the game, and that's the way that you know you think is the best way to progress, then absolutely do the thing that you want to do. You know, I'm not telling you that you're doing it wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking the question as to what is perfect. And you know, with this Let's Play series, I'm not even what I really don't want to happen. The last thing that I want to happen is for you to watch this and to try and copy it. What I really want to happen is for you to watch this and to understand how I go about this, the decisions that I make, and the reasons why I do those things. And then come up with your way of playing it. You know, ultimately what I really want you to come back and say is, Bigfoot, you're wrong. I disagree with you. And I go, yes, great. Why? And then I can understand a bit better. You know, I mean, from my perspective, I've been playing this game. I have actually looked recently. I bought it a week after it got released on Steam. I think March 2016. I remember actually scrolling through the Steam page. I've been playing this long time, and I haven't been on YouTube all of that. In fact, only a very, very small portion of that time have I been on YouTube. You know, I've just been playing this game for me, like anybody else would be, and I feel like I have kind of arrived. And as a finished article, you know, I have a very, very defined strategy. I know how I want to go about things. And because I haven't developed that online, people are like, it's a little bit unusual the way I build this stuff. But that's just because, you know, whenever I used to watch Google videos, I didn't YouTube videos on Factorio back in the early days when it was really a very, very early access game and not many people were playing it. They weren't representing what I wanted to build. They weren't building in the way that I wanted to build, and so I just went off and did my own little thing. Anyway, what I was getting at is that what is perfection? You know, for me, it's about a tailor-made. In terms of Factorio, perfection is about a tailor-made, bespoke factory. What is it that I'm trying to achieve with that factory? You know, in this particular case, I've got the racetrack. And I've got a very specific SPM target I'm trying to achieve, and those are the two things that I'm trying to design this factory to be. And I'd really like for you to watch this and to ask the same question as well to yourself. You know, what factory is it that you're trying to build? I go back to my evolution of design video. You know, how many rockets do you want to launch? How many? You know, how deep into this game do you want to go? How many outposts do you want to build? How many biter nests do you want to, you know? What is perfection? What is perfect? What is the perfect factory for you? What is the perfect factory for the map? What is the perfect factory for the ambitions that you want to achieve with it? Yeah, and if and as you said, as I said, if there's something you go, Nick, Bigfoot, I did completely disagree. Um, then tell me. I'd love to hear it. I want to hear opinions. I want to hear why. That's all fascinating stuff for me. I love the banter on YouTube. I love, I don't necessarily agree with everyone, I'm imagining that not everyone necessarily agrees with me, and that's great. I love the discussion. I love, you know, I think, as a result of one of those discussions, I think I might change the way that I'm going to play this map. Only a very, very small way to do with the perimeter wall, but that's that's how it goes. That's how that's how you get perfection in my world. You just continually move forward. You continually learn. You continually find new ideas. You continually try and find other things that other people are doing, and trying to recognize what, not always what they do that you want to do the same, but what they do that you want to do differently, and why. That's the route to perfection. That's how I feel about it. So yeah, as what looking at this grid and my thought process and everything else, that's what's been going on in my mind this last kind of 20 minutes, half hour or so. Anyway, onwards. More grid. Got to have more grid. I've just been looking at this for about an hour or so. I'm absolutely exhausted. I played cricket yesterday. Um, I mean, it was just a long day, hot day. We won, but we made it much more difficult anyway. We made it much more difficult for ourselves than was necessary. But I'm here, so let's see what I can get done today. So, right, let's have a look at the map. So the grid is done. Well, it's mostly done. Um, there's obviously a few areas where it's not 100%. There's still some places where I need to fiddle with it, and I haven't really finished the railway networks. I'm just doing it bit by bit. So, oh, you can tell by my voice that I'm just not. Anyway, um, so grid is done. Just said that. What I want to do is I need to get on with the nuclear power. I've got this other half down here, the other half of the nuclear power that I need to build. I am conscious of power for my perimeter wall. My power requirements have gone up quite dramatically. Obviously, this whole robot network probably hasn't helped things. So I want to get the other half done. What I'm really thinking about at the moment is getting the time lapse sorted, getting that finished, so I can really concentrate on just finishing this thing. But at the moment, I'm kind of limiting myself to what the things that I can and can't finish, because there are some things that I want the time lapse to capture, and I'm not in a place where I wasn't in a place where I could start on those things. Like, I wanted to get the perimeter wall sorted. I wanted to get that all connected together and to a point where I was happy with it, so that I know at the moment where I need to, I can start flicking things on. Now, I still haven't released any construction robots onto the network. I don't like doing that. I really that moment is a moment that I've released them too early and I've regretted it before. So I always leave it until I'm absolutely certain that I absolutely am ready. They're just a pain in the backside. I mean, if you imagine, I've got a whole load of stuff that needs to be built. If the construction robots are over here, and I start building stuff in my nuclear power plant, then they've got to get all the way over here before they build it. And the robots in my inventory won't build it either. They'll only build a few things. So until everything is at a certain point, I really am reluctant to release those robots onto the network. But I want to get the factory to a point where it's ready, so that I can just release them at a moment's notice. So that's where I wanted to get the grid to. And now for the time lapse, that's the last part of the factory I haven't built yet that I want to get captured. There are some other bits that I've got up here to do. some gaps that I still need to fill. So there's still some factory processes that I need to build that I haven't done yet. But that's not going to get captured by the time lapse. This is, so I've already moved the camera up here. What I want to do, I want to just empty out these mines, remove the patches, and then I'm just going to copy this. You know, now that I've got access to F and G, which just flips these blueprints. You know, in my mind, I think I was planning on rebuilding all of this stuff, but I don't have to. I've got those. I can just flip the blueprints. Some things you learn in this game, and it completely changes the way you think. I've been, you know, my approach has always been, I've had to rebuild this stuff. It's just an automatic response, and now I'm anyway. So I'm going to rebuild the nuclear power plants in here. I'm going to not rebuild them. I'm just going to copy them, and I'm going to get them set up with the train stations up here. So I'll have to with the uranium. So I'll have to set up a certain amount of the train networks to get that to come in. But I don't think that's going to be too much hassle. And then we can start thinking about finishing off the time lapse. In fact, to be honest, by the time it's the same again. It's probably the similar sort of situation as with the perimeter wall tutorial. That time lapse is probably already out. You know, from a time perspective, there's not enough time. You know, by the time I finish, yeah, that time lapse is probably already out. Of, yeah. But from here, yeah. Anyway, that's what I need. That's what I'm going to work towards. Nuclear power, and then I'm going to try and finish off the racetrack, and finish off the time lapse. Yeah, let's go. Okay, so nuclear power is finally poised once again. I've got that set up. It's all been copied and flipped and built and constructed. I've built my my uranium mines, so that's all ready to go. I'm just going to get it all going in the same way that I did the first one, but you know, with a whole lot less ceremony, because I've done all this once. You know, from the time lapse perspective, it's all been seen. So I just want a couple of seconds of footage. Just to give some sort of context of what I've been building. So that's what I'm going to do, and then what I'm going to get on with then, almost straight away after I've got that going, I'm going to start on the final stretch for the time lapse. I'm still really concentrating on getting that finished. So the final stretch is to build all of the racetrack, and that's what I'm going to do. It's kind of like the finale of the time lapse. It's the thing that I've been building up to for quite some time. It's why I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to whiz around, build the racetrack, and then find my way back to the rocket launch the rocket, and then bosh, time lapse done. So yeah, I'm just going to get that whole process going. Now. Okay, so we are about halfway through the racetrack. All of this is coming together very, very, very slowly, but it's all worthwhile. I've put together the time lapse footage up to now, and I've had a look through it. It looks really good, and this particular part I'm really happy with. So yeah, I'm just going to carry on my current plan, no changes. Well, okay. I'm going to take a brief interlude from filling in the racetrack to sort out my circuit network for the racetrack. Now, what I've done is I've put together a map. Let me just pull up the map. Hold on a second. Here we are. Right, so we have 7 individual tracks. So these are them all laid out. We've got 7 different tracks, where they go, and the values that I'm going to apply to those. So I don't know how to explain. This is a tricky one to explain. Right, let's put that down there for a second. What the system I want to have is I want to have a switch for each racetrack. So there's going to be 7 switches. Next to that switch, I want a couple of lights, and these lights will turn on whenever the switch turns on. And depending on, because they can't, if I put another switch up here, let's say for example, they don't interact with each other. So this one won't automatically turn this one off, and I don't think there's a way of automatically switching these off. So if I've got 2 of these switches turned on, i.e. 2 of the tracks have been selected, then that's difficult to know. How do you program a circuit network? Which gates are open? Let me go back to this. So this shows all of the gates that I need to operate from this circuit network, in order to, which ones need to be open, which ones need to be closed for each individual track. So if 2 switches are switched on, then which gates are open and which gates are closed? It's difficult to tell. So I'm going to try and come up with a fancy layout of lights. So we switch on the switch, this turns on the lights. If we switch on a second switch, then these lights will come on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up so that if only one switch is selected, then the lights next to it will be green. If 2 of the switches are selected, then the lights next to it will be red. So I'll have 2 switches with 2 banks of lights that lit up red. So it should show which switches are on, well, it will show which switches are on, and show that two of those switches, 2 of the tracks have been selected. So that's kind of what I need to put together. I need to put together the circuit network that will perform this function, and that's kind of where these values come in, because I'm going to, whenever these switches turn on, I'm going to apply a value to the circuit network that applies to each of these values. That way, if 2 of these switches are switched on, then the value won't be one of these 7 values, it'll be something else. These 7 values can only be achieved, they're kind of unique. You can't achieve any of these values by combining any of the other switches. So, I mean, if we take n equals 16, for example, 8 plus 4 is 12, 14, 15. So the only way, if n is equal to 16, then that says to the circuit network that only that switch has been selected. And if it's not 16, and this switch is on, then it means that some other switches are on at the same time. So those are the 2. That's how I'm going to control which gates are open at any one time. I'm going to set up these series of lights with a series of colours, and then I'm going to apply this n value to try and detect problems. That's kind of the plan, or at least that's kind of the plan for this section up here, which is kind of the control panel for the whole track, or at least, well, the main track anyway. I've got a similar control panel down below, which I'm going to use for the starter track, which is just over to the left over here. But that's not really got any gates, that's not really got any complicated circuit networks I need to worry about. So that's just relatively straightforward. This is the only one that's going to cause me problems. So up here I've got the main control panel for the main racetrack, and then in this part where I've got the starter part of the bus, I'm going to build this map in lights. And so when you play around with these switches, it will show which parts of the track. So I'm going to build a track, this track layout in lights, and then when you play with the switches, it will turn on those particular parts of the light in the map, so that if we're playing with track 1, which is just this loop, for example, then all these other lights will be switched off, and it will just show a loop around here. If we play with 2, then it will come around, then it will just so that you can see what those switches, how those switches are interacting with the main map. I've been thinking about putting in some lights that show the gates as well, but they get complicated with colours, because if I put more than one colour on the same network, then essentially each set of lights need to be completely separate on a completely separate circuit network, so that they don't interact with each other. So for every one of these gates, I would need a series of combinators and other bits and pieces to detect when these particular lights should be on or off. But the colours, I'm still not sure about how I'm going to... Anyway, that's not really... That's kind of... I mean, to some extent, I want to put the gates in there just so I can test it. Because I'm going to set these lights... If I have a section of lights that represent the gate on this map, on this kind of lighting array, then I can test the gates from the control panel without having to run over and see if those gates have opened or closed. Like it would also help me. It won't, it help me fix bugs, fix errors. It may not necessarily be the case that it's useful for anyone looking at it, but it will be a cool feature. I think would be cool to have. So that's my kind of general plan. I've got the kind of the control panel, all of the switches, all the bits and pieces that control. I'm going to have a timer. I'm going to have a timer, so that needs to incorporate somewhere. All of that stuff's going to go up here, and then I'm going to have a map of light, this big lighting array that shows the map of the racetrack, and indicates which parts are switched on or off. That is the grand plan. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. Individually, I'm pretty sure I know how I'm going to piece it together. I've had plenty of time to think about it, but it is a little bit difficult to know how they're going to all interact. How the circuit network is going to have to be separate from... it's going to be tricky. But anyway, just going to crack on with it. I've been looking forward to this, so yeah, let's do it. Alright, so here's my little switch setup. It went down first time, and I've had no problems with it. It's been brilliant. And also, it definitely should mention, I fitted these 7 switches. It fitted in these 7 little blocks in this space. I mean, I made this space on, I don't know, episode 2 of Let's Play, hundreds of hours ago, and it's just fitted in there perfectly. Anyway, so these are my switches. If we start switching them on, oh, there we go. So green, and then we switch 2 on, and then red, and then we switch, and we got green again. So the system I wanted. Oh, come on, little man. It's perfect. It works really well. It's perfect. I'll give you a little breakdown. I am planning on doing a full video just on the circuit networks that I'm using for this racetrack, the racetrack specific circuit networks. I am planning on doing a proper video on that. So I'm just going to give you a brief rundown. So this is obviously, it enters a tick onto the red network when it's on. So we then times that tick by whatever value that I had before that I've shown on that map. 64. We've got 64 down here. Obviously this one will be 32, and then the next one will be 16, and so forth. So that just converts that tick into an N value, which it outputs onto the green circuit network. So the green circuit network is going to be my racetrack wide circuit network. I'm going to run a continuous green circuit network pretty much everywhere on the racetrack. So that's what I'm going to use to control these gates. So I'm going to output that N value onto the gate, onto that main circuit network. For this particular version, for this particular little switch thing, I'm using so that each individual switch is connected together with red circuit networks, and then the individual switches are connected together with a green one. And that's how it's going to work with the rest of the factory. Most of the factory units, the factory processes, I've used the red circuit network for them. So when I whiz round with the green circuit network, it will be completely independent of any systems I've already set up. That's been the plan from the get-go. That's always been the plan. That's what I did for the last racetrack. It worked really, really well. So anyway, back to the system. So we've got our N value. That will be 64 in this case. Then we need to work out. Then I need to work out which colour the lights are, and that's really what most of this is doing. So I've got a few little triggers that will trigger one way or the other, whether it's green or red. So the first trigger is made up of two signals, and I need both of those signals to be true in order for it to be green. And the second signal is the second one for the red lights is exactly the same. So if the tick is 1, then the tick is on, and I want A to be equal 1. And then if n is equal to 64, then I want A equal to 1. So the only way that A will equal 2 is if n is equal to exactly 64, which can only be achieved by flicking on this one switch, and by having the switch on at the same time. So if we go to the next one, then if A equals 2, then green. That's what we want. That's the light. That's the color light that I want to come on when A equals 2. For B, this would be for the red lights. So the tick's still going to be on. The switch is still going to be on. So that's the same. So tick equals 1 equals B equals 1. The same as what we had for the green light. And then we've got n is not equal to 64. So basically, if n is any other value other than 64, then b will equal 1 as well. So the only time that the red light will come on is when b equals 2. So b equal 2 will be when this switch is on, but when the collective value of n of all these values of n switched added together is not equal to 64. And that's how I've kind of, all of these are the same, just with those values changed for the n values that I showed on my map earlier. And yeah, that's worked out really, really well. I'm really happy with it. It's worked out perfectly. I kind of built this in the middle of the space because I didn't know how much space I was going to use. So I'm just going to pick this up and move it over to the left. What I then need to get on with is the gate switches. So if we bring up the map again, I've numbered the gates. So gate 0. These will all refer back to the circuit networks in here. So if we go in here, I think this will do. So gate. I've got 10 gates, and it's worked out exactly. It's worked out another area where this has worked out really, really perfectly. We've got 10 gates, so I'm going to use these 10 numbers to refer back to each of those gates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a series of logistical switches with these combinators, and I'm going to use it so that it outputs 0 equals 1 when I want the gate open, and 0 equals 0 when the gate is closed. And then for gate 1, I'll do the same. So when this 1 value is equal to 1, I want the gates open. And then when this 1 value is 0, I want those gates to be closed. So if we go back to the map, if we take this gate 1, for example, I need a series of combinators that says if n equals 2, then 1 equals 1. And then in another combinator, I want if n equals 4, then 1 equals 1. And then each of these values will be represented by an individual combinator. And then that's how I will output those and get those gates to switch on and off. So I've got 10 individual gates, 10 individual setups for these gates, and that's what I need to set up now. Obviously, some of them have got more combinators than others. So for gate 1, I've got 6 combinators I'm going to need. Gate 5, I'm only going to need 2 combinators. So although for this setup, it's worked out really elegantly because they all use the same number of switches, the same number of combinators, they're all identical. This one's going to be a little bit more chaotic. I might play around with how it's going to work and then see if I can come up with some elegant way of setting it up. I also obviously need to add my timer, but I've got a blueprint for that somewhere. I wonder if I've got it on here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. There's my timer. So I've got that set up already. When I get to the point where I've laid it on the map, I'll go through how that works. That's a little bit more tricky, but yeah, I'll still go for it. For the time being, I'm just going to move this over to the left and start building those combinators for the gates. Get that going. Once I've got that going, I can start thinking about the lighting array. That's what I'll need for this to work, for the lighting array to work. I'll need all of these switches, and I'll need the gate set up. I'm still planning on having a separate light set. You'll see what I mean when I get there. I'm still planning on having the gates separated so that you can see those on the map. That's still the plan, but we'll see. Okay, so just carry on. Okay, addendum. I've just realised that I can achieve this with a much simpler setup. Basically, because the lights are set up to only come on when the tick is 1, I don't need to worry about this tick equals 1 business because the lights are going to be off when the tick is 0. So I can actually achieve this with just the 3 combinators, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I can. Just the 3. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to rejig this a little bit, make it a little bit simpler. So, here is my map. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, and it's not even remotely to scale. I mean, let's just have a look at it for a moment. Okay, just try and picture it in your mind, and then let's have a look at the real map. And what you'll see is that this loop is actually quite small in real world, but it's ginormous in this world. It's not remotely to scale. The fact is, this is kind of a long. It's like a squarish shape. If I was planning out the perfect array of lights, it would probably need to be squarish. And the real world, it's not square by any means. If I was going to try and make it to scale, I'd have to cut down the space, and then this would start to look. Yeah. Anyway, it's diagrammatic. It's just meant to give you a theme of what's going on. So let's have a play with the switches. So at the moment, this is track number 7. So this is when everything is switched on. All of the gates are open. So this is the longest variant of the track. And then we switch off these loops as we go round. So come on, little man, you can do it. There we go. So we turn on 6. Then we switch off this loop, and we switch off this loop, and we just go around here. We switch on 5. Then we switch on this loop, and these 2 loops are switched off. Then this one is switched on, and these 2 are off. Then all 3 are switched off. Then we've just got the loop with this little extension around here added to it. And then we've just got the loop itself, just on its own. So, yeah. Pretty happy with how that works. Not necessarily happy with how it looks, but I think this is the 2nd or 3rd time I've tried, and this is the best variant I've come up with. So I'm sticking with it now, and I've set it all up now. So what I want to do at the moment now is I want to set up I need to connect all of these lights to the same circuit network so I can control their color, and I want to incorporate these red lights that I'm getting up here with these error messages, so that if you've got 2 of these switches switched on, then it gets represented in this map as well. I've pretty much abandoned the idea of including the gates. It's just too fiddly. You know, I'd need a gate here, so it just wouldn't look very good. I would have needed in order to get this done properly and elegantly and perfectly, I suppose that's probably the way. I probably would have needed all of this space just for the map. That's got me. No, I'm not going to do that. It's got me in mind of moving this control panel down here. No, that would be bad. No, I'm sticking with what I got. I was just thinking of rearranging stuff so I can have that map, the full-size map. Maybe bridge it over the railway a little bit, but I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to connect all of these to the same circuit network and then figure out an elegant way of showing these error messages on this map. I'm not really sure if I want them all to be red. I think that might be a little bit over the top. But they're either all red or they're all not red, because then they're on different circuit networks otherwise. The colours on these circuit networks are always a pain. Always a pain. You need to separate all of the things you want to control with colours into each individual circuit networks. So because I'm controlling this racetrack with the green circuit, which is separate from everything else. So I'm going to overlay everything with the red circuit network. But that would mean that all of them are the same colour. Ugh, okay. Let's see what I can come up with. Okay, so here we are in my control panel. This is probably not going to be the final version of the control panel. As you can see, there's still loads of spaces left. And I still have some ideas for stuff later down the road that I want to try out that might need some combinators and some stuff on its own that I can fill some of this space with. But just to quickly go through what I've got. So I've got my switch system up here. That's not changed. Let's just make that go green so we've got some things start making sense. We've got my race map down here. I have been playing around with it. I've made the racetrack a little bit thicker and I've removed a whole lot of lighting and just made it like an outline which shows whether this track layout button thing is giving any errors or anything. So that's the racetrack. We've already gone through all of these switches before. Gates, I went through the gates. That's all set up, ready to go. I'm pretty sure that's ready. I just need to run around and, well, when I get to it anyway, when I build the gates and hook everything up, then I've got it ready to go. Then I've got the timer. So this is it's called the improved combinator. I call it my timing combinator because that's all I ever use it for. I've played around with the settings in here, and for reasons that I'm never quite sure of, this is the only way that I've ever got it to work. So what happens is, this is the trigger. So I've got it set up as y equals 2. That's for complicated reasons that we'll get to in a moment. Once I feed y equals 2 to the combinator, it starts off a timer that will run for however many seconds I put in this box, and it will run for that amount of time regardless of whatever you do, unless you change this box. So it's not, you can't stop the timer using the circuit network. It just kind of does its own thing. So once you've got it going, there's no real way of stopping it other than coming into here and playing around with these values. This s plus 1 equals s. Again, I don't know why this works, but it does work. And I've tried around with a lot of different things in here. This works. I got it working. I just left it at that. I'm happy when it works. Even if it's for some incomprehensible reason, it works. Anyway, what this combinator does is it outputs time in milliseconds. So, although that is useful in some ways, there's no point having a race lap that takes 3,900 milliseconds. I mean, no one's going to know what that means. So these combinators are taking those milliseconds and changing it into milliseconds, seconds, and minutes. So it will count up from milliseconds from 0 to 60, I think, and then it will count back down to 0, and then it will do the same with the seconds, and the minutes will just keep going forever. I mean, I haven't set it up for hours. I don't think it will take hours to run around the racetrack. So that's what these combinators are doing. They're kind of playing around with that value of that this combinator gives off in milliseconds, converting it into these values that I can then use around the racetrack. Countdown. So once we hit this switch to go, there's a certain amount of time that will pass before the race begins, and we change that by playing around with the value in here for C. So if we wanted the countdown to be 15 seconds instead, we just change it to 15, and no problem. That's what this number is doing. So once we get the racetrack going, this will count down from 15 to 0, and then these are the timers that will kick off at the moment the race starts. So that's minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. Down here we've got a whole load of stuff that detects whether there's any errors on the network, so that I can use that around the racetrack. Primarily I needed it for this bit up here, which I'll get to in a moment. So we're just doing a sanity check essentially, just to see whether these are all the different n values. So as long as n is equal to 1, then that means z is equal to 1. No, as long as n is equal to one of these values, then z will equal to 1, and then z equals to 1, y equals 1, and then y equals 1. That's what gets the racetrack going. You know, I was wrong. It's not related to this. This is related to the starting mechanism. So the starting mechanism won't start if there are errors in the track layout. So that's what this is doing. Oh man, this is really complicated. I completely forgot that. So yes. So we're checking to see which one of those unique values is true, and as long as one of them is true, then it will say that y equals 1, and that's how we can tell the circuit network that yep, we're good to go. Then the second y equals 1 is from the tick from that start button. So if y equals 2, we want the timer to start, and that's why I've got y equals 2 in here. Working our way around. So here we have a series of, these are the combinators related to this bit up here. So what I was finding was, if everything starts, then it's really difficult to know that it's started. It just kind of, the timer just kicks off and everything just, from here, once you've got, if you ignore this little panel, there's no real process to see what's going on. So this is kind of a status panel that I've built in to try and show what is happening with this countdown timer, so that once so that you know what's going on, so it's hopefully obvious and intuitive. So firstly, there's some, I've built in some sounds. So if we've got an error in the track layout and we try and we hit the go switch, then it will tell us that we said we can't go yet because there's a problem with the track. So we go back to the track, we select the track, then we hit go. We get a sound telling us that it's good. Then the countdown clock times down. So that can be whatever value you want. Again, 15 seconds, that might not be enough. Once it gets to 0, then we've got a 5-second start sequence. And then once that 5-second sequence is over, then we've got go and everything goes green. One of the useful things about this particular status is that this is all governed by this timer. It's not governed by anything else. So we can go over here, turn the switch off, the timer's still going, so everything still shows green. We can play around with the track. Well, actually, this is a bad idea. If you were actually running a race, you could actually still play around with the track layouts. You could change the track layout whilst the race was going on. I can't prevent that from going on. That's just the way it is. So yeah, the timer will just carry on going up. You can't stop it from going, as I said. There's no triggers that I can use to stop it from going. The only way to stop it from going would be to go into the combinator, go into the timer, delete this and change it for something. Even if it's the same value, it doesn't matter, it stops everything. So that is the basic circuit network that I've got set up here, and I'm really happy with it. I mean, another something else that I'm really happy with. I mean, other than the fact that it's a little bit uneven. As I said, I've still got some stuff that I'm going to play around with, some other ideas for things that I might be able to use some of this space for. But for the time being, that's probably enough. You know, I've covered all the basics. I've got the bare bones of it going. I've got all my values set up, I think, pretty much the way that I want it. So all of my critical values, if we hover over power, we've got over on the right hand side, we've got a whole load of critical values. So I've got a whole sheet of values that I need for the racetrack. There might be other values that I need to add. And, you know, I don't really like using any other values other than the values in here. Specifically all of these alphanumeric ones and the colors. You know, you could easily set up circuit networks with some of this stuff, but I just don't like doing that. I try and limit myself to just... I've never come up with the situation where I've run out, let's put it that way. I've still got plenty of blanks on my list, so that's the basic discipline, is to keep all the values in here, and then I can use the colors. But from here, I think I'm just gonna carry on with the racetrack itself, carry on building that. I'm still focused on getting the time lapse finished, and for the time lapse purposes, I've shown enough. You know, the time lapse is showing all of this stuff. That should be enough to give the gist of the story of what I'm trying to do. That was really what I was trying to achieve with this. I know I needed to build it at some point, and I was looking forward to it, but I've done all of the things, I've done all of the ideas that I can do at this point, so the rest of it will have to wait. That won't be on the time lapse. So from here, it's just a case of carrying on with more building of the racetrack. Back to laborious pain. But we're halfway through. We're over halfway through now, so yeah, just got to keep on. We are on the final stretch. Final stretch. The camera is working its way over to rocket launch. Let's have a quick look where we are. It's moving a steady 2 frames a second. Oh, we're just capturing the bottom of it. So it's moving slowly. That's because I kind of set it off whilst I was building this racetrack, so it needs to progress at the same rate that I was filming that at. So I've set a timer. Because obviously I know when it's going to arrive. It's got a certain number of frames it needs to take. I've still got 11 minutes until it gets where I need it to go, and then I'm going to pause it. Now, what I want to get on with, what's going on here? Here we go. What I need is, obviously I'm still focusing on finishing the time lapse. So I'm just looking at this space that I've got up here. This space up here, and this kind of corner that I've left here. I mean, this corner I can, anyway. I'm still not sure what I'm going to use this space for. There's still a lot of flexibility. I've got a few things still on my list that I would like to build. But really what I need for the moment is the things that I need to build. So for the rocket launch, I need solar panels and accumulators. And those are 2 things that the factory isn't set up to build yet. So that's what I'm going to set up here. I'm going to get that going up here. Yeah, just so it can start feeding its way down, building up supplies in the conveyors, and then I can kind of set these rockets off with some kind of a bang rather than, you know, drips and drabs. That's what I really want to get a few rockets off like straight away. So I need loads of supplies in the factory. Although I suppose solar panels and accumulators, that's only really for the satellite. That's not for anything else. So you don't really need a lot of them. Anyway, that's what I want to do. That's what I need to do now. At some point the camera is going to arrive. I'm going to need to pause the camera, but that won't stop me from what I'm doing. Yeah, I just need to be aware of it when it stops. So, oh, I haven't got any inventory. Yeah, more build. Right, rocket launch. We are here. The last part, and then I can wrap up this time lapse and get it off into the world. Fun times. I mean, I've just been looking at the clips for this Let's Play episode. This is going to be a long one. I mean, I know you're watching it. It's probably already quite long. Yeah, I've just had to completely ignore it. I'm still recording the clips. I'm still doing what I normally do, but I'm just ignoring how long it is because I've been concentrating on the time lapse. I also have kind of an idea of where I want these episodes to play out, where I want to be at certain places. So, the end of this episode was always going to be launch the rocket. So that's what I'm going to do. I just want to, well, let's have a look at the time lapse. I've just zoomed in, so we're now nice and close. And I'm going to do what I always do with these rocket launches, which is to set up a little circuit network so that the lights will come on as the rockets build up. So as the rocket builds up in the rocket silo, the lights will build up, and then when it gets to 100%, all of the lights will be on. It will turn green, and off it will go. It's what I do it's a standard thing that I always do. It's always slightly different because I've always got slightly different numbers of rocket silos, slightly different positionings of things, but the general principle is always the same. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. This is just wrap this up. I'm excited about finishing. I'll be honest. We are off. We are going. So the way that this whole thing works, this lighting array, is via these inventory sensors. This is a mod that you need to download. So if you put it next to something, then it will detect what that something is doing and output a signal back to the circuit network. So if we hover over, we can see that all of the bits and pieces that it's picking up. The main thing that I'm tracking is the little clock. So the little clock tells me how much percent the rocket silo is towards launching the rocket. So at the moment it's 40%, 41%, etc. So all of the lights are set up with that lighting with that level varying. So we start off at zero at the bottom. Oh, what's happened here then? Ooh, we have an issue. There we go. Okay, fine. That was relatively straightforward. Oh, we've got to do the same here. There we go. Right. Yeah, so all of these lights are set up with a different value. So as the clock ticks over, each light will light up as we go. Ordinarily, I would separate these circuit networks with something a bit more elaborate, but I've only got 2 rocket silos, so I'll put one on the red and one on the green. That kind of made sense to me. Other than that, it's all relatively the same. So we've got a clock set up here for the red. These are the individual lighting circuits that we need. So if it's less than 35%, then it'll be red. If it's 100%, then it'll be green. And then we've got our standard range. So if it's less than 100, then A equals 1. If it's greater than 35, then A equals 1. And then if A equals 2, if both of those things are true, then we output yellow. So yeah. So we've just got to finish tracking this, and then we are done. We are done. Happy days. Righty ho then. So, rockets are launched. Time lapse is finished and been released. I'm happy about that. But we are not done yet here. This Let's Play has still got some legs to go yet. We've still got to plumb in all of these resources. We've still got to try and wind up some SPM. Got to see if this factory can actually achieve it. We've got to see if my perimeter wall can stand up to these biters. I mean, most of the perimeter wall is probably going to be fine. I'm looking over here. This is potentially the hottest area. But we've still got that to find out. So we're not done yet. But for this episode, that's more than enough. Oh, this is the longest episode by far. As I've explained, I've just had to concentrate on other things whilst I've been finishing off this time lapse. But for today, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been good. Till next time.